Yeah, Keisha never comes by here. She
Hey, LaKresha, it's Jamie.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good.
I've got the check-in code posted, so I'll stay on for a few minutes just to make sure everyone's able to get checked in. But you should be able to start here shortly.
Okay.
All right, and the check-in code, I'll go ahead and say it and then post it in the chat. It looks like majority of the folks are here, so it's 476214. And if anyone has any issues just checking in, just have them send an email to Jamie Evans or even like the Training League account and I can get them checked in. But you should be good to go, LaKresha.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for having me. So as an introduction, I'm LaKresha Graham. I am a faculty member at Rockhurst University. I study intercultural communication. In addition, I have a consulting business, The Graham Effect. And so today we're going to talk about the cultural detective method. Am I able to share? Yes.
Yeah, you should be able to share content. And it looks like we can see your screen.
All right, awesome. Thank you. So first, we're going to start off with a video from the Cultural Detective website.
Your business is
Can you hear it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
increasingly dependent on a global workforce, a global customer base, and the ability to navigate a complex maze of multicultural situations. Situations that, if not handled well, can lead to employee turnover, lost customers, bad publicity, and more. The Cultural Detective can provide you and your employees a simple yet powerful process for navigating that maze successfully. To boost productivity, save time and money, and strengthen your global business relationships. Thank you for spending the next few minutes learning how. The Cultural Detective is not a list of do's and don'ts. It does not require you to memorize an encyclopedia of culture-specific customs and data. Because it's more than information. It's a practical, repeatable process designed to build specific skills that you can start to apply the very moment you learn it. And, importantly, the Cultural Detective process is a core foundation that enables you to continually leverage new knowledge, skills, and experience to more effectively build long-term cross-cultural competence. Here's how it works. Through an experiential learning process, Cultural Detective helps you understand why colleagues from other countries act the way they do, and why you act and react the way you do. You begin to see that we are all driven by our values and beliefs, influenced by our culture, our upbringing, and our life experiences. You learn how common sense is really cultural sense, common only to those sharing the same cultural lens, core values, and patterns of behavior. Starting with that fundamental insight, the process enables you to develop strategies to bridge differences and access the full potential of every team member. Robust interactive training materials engage learners in real-world critical incidents. Stories of intercultural misunderstandings that lead to lost customers, unproductive employee teams, and ultimately lost revenue. With each business case, learners practice the process using the Cultural Detective worksheet. It's a highly flexible tool that requires them to observe the facts, words, and actions of the people in the case studies before making judgments. They study and discuss each culture's value lens, get to know the people and their core values, and how those values influence what they say and do. They learn to recognize positive intentions instead of jumping to negative conclusions. With that recognition, they learn to understand other perspectives and manage cultural expectations. Finally, they discuss ways to build bridges to creatively harness the values and intentions of everyone involved. In other words, they learn to leverage cultural differences and similarities as assets for more effective solutions for the organization, employees, teams, and customers. Over 100 intercultural experts living and working all over the world collaborated to make these learning and global effectiveness tools seamlessly customizable to your industry, your organization, and your product. Ready-to-use materials covering hundreds of cultures, industries, and job functions provide just-in-time flexibility, anywhere, anytime delivery, and minimal preparation time to use effectively. And importantly, the Cultural Detective series can be implemented as a classroom session, coaching tool, team effectiveness intervention, independent learning, virtual online course, or as part of a blended learning solution. If you are ready to give members of your organization the tools they need to perform in today's environment, if you are ready to achieve more effective and longer-term solutions for your organization, if you are ready to build a strong foundation for global competitiveness through intercultural competence, contact us today.
Again, that was just an introduction to Cultural Detective from the actual company. So we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about the Cultural Detective method and then dipping our toe in using the method and thinking about our own cultural values and how it influences our interactions with others. If my PowerPoint would open. Right. So again, as you saw in some of the video, they talked about beginning with positive intentions. Many times when we're interacting with people who either we disagree with or we may have different cultural values, different perspectives, we tend to think that they are doing things to frustrate us. Like they're intentionally seeking out to get on our nerves, to annoy us, to frustrate us, when it just may be that they are communicating the best way that they know how, and that they believe that you have the same values, beliefs, attitudes that you do. So one thing I love about Cultural Detective is beginning with positive intentions. How can I think more positively about what they're trying to communicate, not necessarily thinking that they're intentionally trying to frustrate me or annoy me. As you saw in the video, with Cultural Detective, what they do is they give case studies about different scenarios that can occur with people in different cultures. And so then you have person A, and what is it that they said and did? So what are things that can be observed? And again, with person B, and then thinking about person A's values, beliefs, attitudes, and cultural perspective, their cultural sense. If you were begin with positive intentions, like what are they trying to communicate and what are they trying to do based upon their cultural values? And they actually do give what they call value lenses of different cultures. So these are 4 to 7 cultural values that cultures have, that tend to be common amongst people in the culture, the ways they communicate them, and the ways they see the world. And so then based upon what you see objectively, what you know about the culture, then thinking for both person A and person B, how can we bridge a cultural gap? So what's occurring that's causing conflict based upon the different cultural senses that two people are having, and what are things that people in this scenario can do to rectify it? And as people who participate in the process, you start to learn how to think through in your own life and life circumstances, how can I work and develop my own cultural sense and also build a bridge with others in the moment? Or even if I take a step back, how can I build those bridges? What questions, comments, concerns do you have so far? Absolutely none. I'm so glad everybody turned on their camera, because that shows you're ready to participate, because we do have some exercises. So we're going to do something called self-exploration. And so this is a part of the Cultural Detective method where we think about our own cultural values. So I want to take a few minutes and I'm going to have you share it with everybody in the group, since we have a smaller group this evening. So I want you to think about a value that's important to you. So again, remember, you're going to share this. What's the name of that value? Sometimes we have values and it's hard for us to put a finger on the name of it, like what to call it. So think of like the closest word to that you would name that value. Why do you believe this value is important? Give a story from your past that will illustrate where this value comes from or why this value is important. And then what's a negative interpretation of this value? So the thing to keep in mind regarding culture, generally it's neutral. Like as far as values or beliefs, it's neutral. But from someone else's perspective, that it can be seen negatively. Okay, so I have an example for myself. Value. So my example, one value that I have is responsibility. And why this value is important, I think it's important that people take responsibility for the choices that they make. People should make responsible choices and mitigate negative results that comes from lack of responsibility. So growing up, so an example like where it comes from in my childhood, growing up, my mom would leave the house to go to work, and she would give my older brother and I chores to do before she left. What was that chore list? Clean the house. And by the time she came home from work, the house should be clean. There was no chore wheel, no like direct division of labor. There was no, okay, my brother should do A, B, and C, and I should do X, Y, and Z. It was just, she would say, clean the house should be clean. And each time the house was clean by the time she got home. And so sometimes I point out that my mom has 3 children, but she would only give chores to 2 of those children, which I found very fascinating growing up. That's a whole nother, set of issues. But negative interpretation of that value is being seen as rigid because you're inflexible. Like if people are supposed to be responsible and then they're not responsible and they have consequences because of that, you can see them as rigid for enforcing, them being responsible. Also, goody two shoes. Like if you're always doing the right thing, then you're seen as a goody two shoes. So I want you to take a few minutes. Let's start with, let's say 5. If you finish before then, that's fine. So think about what values are important to you. Name that value. Why is it important? A story that illustrates that value, and what could be a negative interpretation of that value. So how can someone else take that value negatively? And if you finish before the 5 minutes, we have about another minute and a half. Just let me know so that way I have an idea of where we are regarding time.
Okay, I'm done with my answer.
Okay, thank you.
I'm done as well.
Okay, thank you.
Me too.
Okay.
Me too.
All right, awesome. Thank you all. So if anybody wants to start and share what they have, if you could like say your name. I don't know if you do anything particular as far as introductions. If you do, like you can share that information. But at least share your name and then, give your responses regarding your value, why is it important, an example, and then a negative interpretation.
I can go. I'm Sophie Jaroba. I guess, been in the league for 8 years. I feel like we usually do this. And I'm the current Step Up community director. And my value is curiosity. And I believe it's important. I guess I always think it's important to be continuously learning and questioning everything in your environment. I think it came from when I was really little. My dad would always just be giving me quizzes, or whatever I said would follow it up with, why? We'll explain that. And then, but I guess a negative interpretation would be that, if I'm always questioning everything, I could be seen as maybe not believing the person or asking too many questions or not buying into the idea that's being put out there.
I find it hilarious that your dad is the one that kept asking why and why is that the case when usually it's the children that are why.
I know, he created a monster, really, because then I did it back to him.
Sure, you love that. All right, thank you, Sophie. Who'd like to go next?
I can go next. And I'm sorry I can't turn my video on. I'm having issues with the camera. But my name's Michelle King. I'm the Step Up Chair for the Action Team Committee this year and a JL 360 advisor. So my value is kindness. And the reason I think that it's important is because I think when you don't treat others with kindness, it prevents them from, showing up as their true self and can put up barriers. So my example is that I'm an engineer and I'm in the 5th year of my career, so still kind of younger. And I've just had so many experiences with the senior engineers where they lose patience if you don't understand something quickly enough, or get frustrated if you didn't do something exactly how they thought it should be done. And I've just felt it and seen it with other young engineers that I guess lack of kindness and empathy in the way they treat us can kind of put up barriers to how we learn and how well we perform on a project. On the flip side, I think a negative interpretation is that somebody could believe that acting with kindness could allow them to be taken advantage of or not taken seriously enough.
What type of engineer are you, Michelle?
So I'm a civil engineer.
Okay. I just find it interesting, especially with engineers, to find that there are so many different fields of engineering and what people do. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Who would like to go next?
I'll go. Hi, my name is Emily, and I think it's my 5th year in the league. And my value is similar to kindness. It can be is respect, and so it's kind of how you treat everyone. You need to treat them with respect. And I think the story that's kind of stuck with me over the years is I'm actually kind of from the wedding world, but years and years ago, my dad was at the luncheon to launch Martha Stewart Weddings. And at the table, Martha was going around and she was treating the people that were working the luncheon horribly, and needless to say, he did not advertise. He was just appalled, and I think that's really just instilled, like, you can't do that. Everyone needs to be treated with respect, and especially the people who are helping you. You never know. So I think maybe the negative interpretation of respect is maybe someone has a different definition of respect, and that may be the negative.
Okay. So yeah, so people can communicate respect in lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I 100% agree with you. Like, you always want to treat people who are in service with you or to you with respect. I mean, they're taking care of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. All right. And I think Megan.
Yeah. Hi there, I'm Megan, and I think I might have done this wrong, but mine was like hard work ethic. It's, I think it's just instilled in me because everybody in my family, that's what we do. It's just work, work, work. And growing up, all my family did was work, work, work. And the negative is sometimes you work too much and you miss out on things. And I have a tendency to, if people don't work as much as I do, then be like, oh, they're not a hard worker. So.
Okay. Oh, hold on. I will be right back. Around this time of day, I always forget that, like, the sun starts to go down and it's just really harder to see. But it's daylight savings time, so that helped me a little bit as far as extending that out. So thank you all for sharing that with me, and then also with people who will watch the recording. And with Cultural Detective, again, what they're trying to get at is thinking about cultural values. Where do they come from? How are they communicated? And then also a negative interpretation. So again, like with the first few questions, I mean, those things are either neutral or wonderful. Like, of course, we want to treat people with kindness and respect and have a hard work ethic and be curious. But to someone else, what may be curiosity might be nosiness. What might be kindness might be being an easy target or being taken advantage of. So it just depends on how people might interpret like that communication behavior. And then there's also there are people who can have the exact same value, but how they communicate it might be different. So like curiosity, for some people, it might be I ask someone questions. Someone else, it might be I do research. For someone else, like kindness might be, okay, like let me check in with someone to see if they're okay. For someone else, they might give them a gift. So how they communicate those values may be different also. Same value, how it's communicated is different. Any comments so far or questions? All right, so I use my example. So to explore this further, and this is like, you don't necessarily need to take time to think, but thinking about it. So identify a time that you did not live out your value. So that value you just said, why did you not, like, can you think of a time you didn't live out that value? Why didn't you live out that value, and how did it make you feel? I can start. Um, so there have been times where I need to be somewhere at a particular time and I show up late. And I do not like that. It's never intentional, but it always makes me feel bad. It makes me feel anxious. It makes me feel irresponsible. I get knots in my stomach, even if it's not that big of a deal. Even if I get there and like they're running late, I still feel like I should be on time. I need to be responsible. Um, so for me, being on time is like a part of being responsible. As a responsible person, I need to be on time places, unless there's like something that really truly prevents me from being there on time, or there is truly something that's more important. Um, but that's rare. So can you all think of a time where you didn't live out your values? So let's have two people share on that one, and then we'll have two people share on the what are ways that people going against their values annoy you.
I can go.
Okay.
One of the ways was I was in a major accident and I couldn't work for 3 months. And I was severely depressed. And I realized that I needed to come up with other purpose than just work in my life. And then 10 years later, I broke a hip and I refused to take off work because I didn't want to feel that way again. And so I'm working on ways to have a happy balance.
Okay. That makes sense. I hope you can both.
Oh, was someone else going to go?
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, and this is kind of a generic one, but I'm a lawyer, which is probably where the research really comes into play. But there have been just countless amount of times at work when I feel like I ran out of time, or I didn't research a certain case or a certain issue as much as I fully wanted to, and had to submit something. And it just makes me feel like incomplete, like there's something else out there that I should have been finding or looking for. But it also, on the flip side, it's when do you stop too? But it always kind of haunts you.
I understand that you can always be working on something.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
It'll never be perfect. But just keep work. But at some point, you gotta
Just stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I 100% understand that. Michelle, did you want to share? Like, you can.
Yeah. So my example is going to be, this is about a year or so ago. And I was working with an engineer that's younger than I am on something, and she had the whole week to work on it. And I don't think that we communicated as well as we could have. And so it was kind of getting late on Friday, and I was wanting to head out, and I realized that there was a lot of work that we still had to do to meet the deadline. And just as the day went on, and I found more and more issues with the work that she had done, I found myself getting irritated, and I could hear myself starting to act like, all those senior engineers that I've worked with that I felt like didn't treat me, with kindness in a way. And so I that was a good experience for me to step back and think about, when I start getting triggered and frustrated, how to handle that better in the future.
Okay, so you don't necessarily have to answer this question. If you're like, I don't want to answer it, that's fine. Do you feel like almost like a sense of empathy with the senior engineers in that moment?
Yeah, yes, I do think it kind of, in certain cases, has made me realize, if they've just got a lot on their plate, I could see how, it's not me that's causing the frustration, it's just the situation.
Okay. All right, and so then if I can have two people respond to the second question. So what are ways that people going against your values annoy you? So why is that the case? Do you believe generally, not again, like you could probably point to specific instances, but like generally, is it intentional or unintentional? And in what ways does your value frustrate or annoy others? So again, I will answer for myself. When people are irresponsible, when people are late to something that I planned, when I set a deadline and people miss it, when people say they will do something and they don't do it, or don't seem to have like a good reason for not doing it, it really frustrates me because, and this is part of the reason like responsibility is like one of my values is your responsibility doesn't just impact the person, it impacts others. So now you're making other people's lives harder because of your irresponsibility. I do believe it's not intentional. I like generally, I think life happens for most people. There are people who just aren't, on varying degrees of organization, life happens. So I think it's not intentional. It's not like people are trying to annoy me or frustrate me, but also know that like my value can annoy and frustrate others because it feels as though I'm not giving people grace or the ability to fail and not feel bad about it. So I know that those ways can make people frustrated also. All right, are there two people who would like to share? Okay, Emily?
I think like when respect is like also like listening to the person in front of you. I think when someone is not when you're talking about something important and someone is on their phone going away or doing something else, they're not really listening and showing you respect, and it's really, really frustrating. And sometimes I do think it's intentional, and then maybe you bring up something later that you had mentioned early and they weren't really paying attention, and it's just frustrating. I'm sure everyone's had that experience.
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely. I've had that experience. All right, how about one other person?
Is there anyone left?
Well,
I can.
for the first question, so that's
Oh, okay. I can go.
okay.
For the ways.
When people
Well, I think this is in my own personal life, but my son is not a hard worker. And so I have to sit back and remember that not everybody is like, but I tend to judge him on his work ethic, and like he's 23 trying to figure things out. And just because he's not working as hard as I think he should right now doesn't mean that he won't get it. And maybe he just watched his parents work too hard and wants to enjoy life a little bit. I don't know, but it frustrates me, and it frustrates him that I am like that.
Do you believe he's intentionally or unintentionally, going against your value?
I don't think it's intentional, but maybe. I mean, that's all, like I've always preached, like, I don't care what you do, but you do it and you work hard at it,
Mm-hmm.
and he is just my wanderer, not going to work right now.
Yeah. Is he an only
So,
child?
huh?
Is he an only child?
No, nope.
Okay.
He's 18 months older than his sister, and his sister is the hardest worker.
Okay.
She is in college and half the time has 2 jobs. So I think he's just different, but it's making me, because there are people that can't work or don't work as hard, and I do judge.
Yeah.
And I need to stop.
Yeah. Or that it's like they have to find a thing that they want to work at, not something
Right.
they're not very invested
Yeah.
in.
And I love what I do. So it's easy for me to work a lot of it, and I don't understand when people are, I have to put myself in check that some people are in situations that are not fun to work.
Yeah.
So
We're extremely, extremely demanding.
Yes.
When they're doing it. So it's not that they're not working hard, it's just they might not be working a lot, if that makes sense. Like they might not work overtime, like those 8 hours.
Right.
So part of the reason I asked, again, going back to my story, like when I find, like when people have 2 kids, like they're drastically different from each other. It's really hilarious. So many of my friends, they have.
Well, I probably would leave the chores for my daughter to do, knowing that he's not going to get them done.
Yes.
I probably was a lot like your mom.
Okay. Yeah. So my mom, and then it's just kind of funny because she's like, my younger brother is like a lot different than my older brother and I. And then I go, well, he grew up in a different house. Like that's also part of it. In addition to like he has like a different personality. Like he's just like sometimes I'm amazed at like how outgoing and creative he is. Because my older brother and I aren't really like that. So it's interesting how kids like just become so different from each other. Um, so anyway, that's part of the reason I asked is because yeah, like that, like I've noticed like a pattern where kids can kind of, and then also there's the like you said, he's like relatively young, so you don't know
Right.
at like 32, 52. So but again, going back to culture detective and values is this is the beginning with positive intentions. Is are people doing this to intentionally like violating or going against your cultural value because they intentionally want to? Like, do they intentionally want to be unkind? Do they intentionally not want to have a hard work ethic? Do they intentionally want to not be curious, or do they intentionally want to be disrespectful, or do they intentionally want to be irresponsible, or is there something else going on that isn't about violating your cultural values? Is it that they just have a different cultural value? Is it that that the way they communicate their cultural value might be different? So I know some people, so going back to May using the example of your son, I know there are some people, it depends on like they may not necessarily work hard, and I'll put that in quotes, at a paid job, but they'll work extremely hard at a volunteer job, or they'll work extremely hard for their families. So it might just be the context that like the value of work ethic comes through. Or again, going back to Emily, when you're talking about respect and how people might communicate respect differently, like that's also part of it too. It's like, how is that value communicated? So many times when going back to that cultural bridge, sometimes it's like conflicting values, but it might also be the way those values are communicated that might also be a challenge. So we're going to spend some time talking a little bit about different cultural detective packages. And so these are the different areas, let's go with that, or the different types of programs that they have. So they have programs based upon countries or regions. So this is more geographic. So Argentina, Belarus, Colombia. So those are, so then you have like particular countries, but then you also have some regions that they identify, such as Western Africa. They also have packages regarding co-culture, so African American culture, deaf culture, generational harmony. I don't think they've gotten to Generation Z, but they might have. But they definitely have, you know, baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, and how each one of those generations have different values: Jewish culture, Latino or Hispanic culture, LGBTQ, men and women, and then different topics. So blended culture, so people who are, let's say, third culture kids, so they grew up lots of different places, so they don't necessarily have a home or a specific culture that they're attached to. So they have many different aspects of themselves. So that also creates a culture in them. Global diversity and inclusion, global business ethics, returning reentry. So again, like with Culture Detective, it's not just looking at one particular culture, but it's also how those cultures interconnect. So going back to, let's say you have Argentina, but you also have generational harmony. So how can someone being from Argentina, but also let's say Gen Y, influence their cultural values in addition to like someone Argentine and being Gen X, like, or being a baby boomer. Like, so then you have different cultural values that exist. So it's how do all those aspects of ourselves come up with cultural values and then influence how we communicate with others. And then also how we interpret their communication with us. All right, so here's some resources. So it's the Cultural Detective website, and then Cultural Detective online. You can also sign up to become, I'm a certified Cultural Detective facilitator. So you can also sign up to be a Cultural Detective facilitator, go through the workshop, and then you have access to a lot more materials, but then they also teach you how to kind of work through Cultural Detective. I can also come back and do more specific types of training or workshops regarding specific packages, or just talking about Cultural Detective or intercultural communication more. Since I thought there was going to be a much larger group, so I planned on things taking much longer. But as we wrap up, what's one thing you're going to take from our time today?
I would say just, I guess, taking a minute and trying to figure out where people are coming from now instead of jumping to conclusions or judging.
That's a good one.
Yeah, and kind of along those same lines, I like how you had asked me if my experience with that younger engineer gave me some empathy for, some of the ways that the more senior engineers have acted. I think that's something that's good to keep in mind, that like that empathy piece of it.
I think mine is going to be to remember that kindness comes in all different ways for people. Because my husband tends to like to buy me gifts, and I do kindness of like acts of kindness, I guess. And so I always kind of like stub my nose at the gift, but I need to remember that that's his way of being kind.
Sounds like the love languages.
Right.
Which is also, when you think like cultural values of how do we communicate love and affection to others. So. And Emily, did you want to share?
I guess I think just like maybe what I've gained is before you just not everyone shares the same viewpoints, and to stop before you proceed with saying something, and think about it, and you might see things from a different point of view.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. That's been like what I've loved about doing a cultural detective method is because, even as simple as like begin with positive intention. So I'm driving, someone cuts me off or like comes over without putting their blinker on. It's like, why didn't you put on your blinker? Then I could have, it's like, wait a minute, maybe they just forgot. People make mistakes. They didn't think about how this frustrated. And then it's like, okay, it helps to calm me down. But then also, like you said, Emily, create empathy for others, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. I'll think like I probably does stuff while I'm driving that frustrates someone else. Like, but we're all okay. That's what matters. And then lots of different, like there's lots of situations where I'll get frustrated, and it's like, okay, let's begin with positive intentions. What could be happening that isn't about me and my value, but maybe it's about their values, and maybe just something practical that happened. But thank you all for your time and your participation. I truly appreciate it. Did you have any questions or comments for me before we wrap up?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Like, this has been fun. And also now the gift of time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I don't know what happened. Like, do we just all leave? Or?
Usually, I think so.
I wasn't sure if like you have something afterwards or.
Oh no, this is usually just it.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I'm just
You're free to go too.
Thanks.
Thank you.